Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me today to present my work. The topic I'm going to talk today is part of my research of PhD and titled The Influence of South Pacific Convergence Zone Heating on the South Pacific Subtropical Anticyclone. And the other people that collaborate in the project is my advisor, Dr. Natalie Burrows, Eric Svensson, and David M. Strauss from George Mason University. So this is zone mean distribution of the atmosphere radiation budget from Earth radiation budget experiment that shows the net incident short wave radiation and not net long wave radiation that going out of the atmosphere. The blue line here shows the net short wave radiation in the top of the atmosphere that incident, and red line is the net short. If you look at the zonal distribution of it, we have like from tropics to 40° north and south, maximum of the tropical region that we have more than short wave radiation than long wave radiation, whereas in the polar flank, basically from Italy to pole, we have more outgoing long wave radiation than incident short wave radiation. What does it mean that in climatologically, tropical surface region actually absorbs more energy than what it produces back to the space, whereas in the pole or mid-latitude region, Earth radiates back more energy than what it absorbs. So there has to be like a polar transport energy from tropics to pole. Now, this is a schematic diagram, and due to the more heating over the tropical region, the warm air rises from tropics to upper troposphere. And as a result of polar transport of energy, the warm air moves towards pole of both hemispheres from tropics. And the warm air goes, when it comes to the subtropical region in both hemispheres, it cools down, descends back to Earth's surface, and goes back to tropical region and rises again. This creates a circulation known as the Hadley Circulation. And the Hadley Circulation descending branch creates a high pressure ridge in the both subtropical region. So this is like a high pressure belt, you can say, like in the subtropical in both hemispheres, in 30° north and south. In the tropics, it creates like a more of like a low pressure belt. Now, this is sea level pressure from Era-interim Composite from 1979 to 2016 annual mean. And the color shaded here are sea level pressure, where the vectors are the wind vector of 1925 hectopascal wind. And we can see definitely there are actually Hadley pressure belts, as we have talked about. There is a higher pressure over the 30° north and south in the subtropical region. But however, if you look at more closely, there are more intensified, like the black contour here, 120 hectopascal, whereas the white contour is 122 hectopascal. So there are more intensified sea level pressure associated with a counterclockwise wind circulation in the southern hemisphere and clockwise circulation in the northern hemisphere in the eastern flank of the subtropical ocean, known as subtropical anticyclone. Now, subtropical anticyclone are associated with the Hadley circulation. However, they are more intensified and more stronger in intensity. So the question becomes then how they're more intensified when the Hadley circulation is not that stronger as a subtropical anticyclone. So what is driving the subtropical anticyclone? Now, subtropical anticyclone strength can be decomposed into two components. One is the zonal mean component, one is the zonal asymmetric component. Now, zonal mean component is due to the Hadley circulation, as we just talked about, which is maximum local winter because of the summer hemisphere. To winter hemisphere, the polar transport of energy is stronger due to the more temperature gradient. So warm air rises in the summer hemisphere and moves towards the winter hemisphere more in the winter time, obviously, and creates a zonal mean strength and leads to the stronger subtropical anticyclone due to the Hadley circulation. However, there is a zonal asymmetric component which comes from the local landmass diabatic heating. So basically, the more heating over the land and cooling, long wave cooling over the eastern flank of ocean creates like a warm air rising over the land and descending over the ocean, and creates like a Walker circulation type of, like a local Walker circulation type of circulation, which is maximum local summer, obviously because the summer hemisphere creates more radiation seasonality. So local density thermal construct creates a local, more asymmetric component to the subtropical anticyclone. Now, question becomes, why do we need to study more subtropical anticyclone? What is the influence of it? A subtropical anticyclone is very influential in weather climate, especially on the tropics, on the subtropical to the mid-latitude region. For example, subtropical anticyclone connects tropics to mid-latitude through westerlies and easterlies, and transport moisture from tropics to subtropics. It also can shape the mid-latitude and tropical cyclone track, because subtropical anticyclone are more in terms of time scale and space, they are more bigger compared to the cyclone, or the cyclone are spatially small and they move very fast compared to subtropical anticyclone. As a result, subtropical anticyclone can shape where the cyclone will landfall, or where they will the track will be next couple of weeks, like in the weather type where the subtropical anticyclone doesn't even move from the place. And it can also influence the air-sea interaction by impacting the radiation budget, influencing the marine boundary layer clouds. It can also act as a forcing on local sea surface temperature and precipitation. It can also be vice versa. So therefore, subtropical anticyclone is very crucial component of weather and climate, especially if we want to predict how the climate change will influence the weather and climate in the future, especially in the mid-latitude and subtropical region. Now, if you look at the seasonality of the subtropical anticyclone, the top figure shows the December, January, February mean, or DJF, and June, July, August, JJA in the bottom. This is the same figure as before, however, for these two seasons. Now, if you look at the two anticyclone in Northern Hemisphere, just focusing on them, and they are more stronger in area and strength in the Northern Hemisphere in June, July, August. So basically, which is local summer in Northern Hemisphere. So as we know that in local summer, the asymmetric component due to lens thermal composite is stronger. So Hoskins and other from 1996 and other way, like so many papers have shown that the zonal asymmetric component due to strong Asian monsoon heating and North American monsoon heating, African monsoon heating creates the descent over the subtropical ocean. That makes the North Pacific anticyclone and North Atlantic anticyclone to be stronger in June, July, August. In terms of wind, circulation, and sea level pressure both. Now, if we look at the Southern Hemisphere, I want to focus on the Atlantic and Indian for now. They are also stronger in the June, July, August, which is austral winter, so Southern Hemisphere winter. Now, in winter, so winter is stronger because Hadley Circulation is stronger in Southern Hemisphere compared to the local land sea thermal contrast. This is because Northern Hemisphere has more land ocean ratio, and whereas in Southern Hemisphere the land is smaller compared to the Northern Hemisphere, so land ocean ratio is smaller. As a result, land monsoonal heating in the Northern Hemisphere is stronger, whereas in the Southern Hemisphere, due to the same monsoonal heating, it creates a descent more of a Hadley circulation and creates like a temperature gradient from tropics to pole, and leads to the zonal mean component to be stronger. As a result, we have interhemispheric transport of energy that shows South Indian and South Atlantic anticyclone to be stronger. That is also shown by Lee et al. And other paper that how the Asian monsoon and more stronger in area and strength. Although it is not that stronger, but it is getting a season is like opposite of other four subtropical anticyclones. They are more stronger at the same time, whereas South Pacific is stronger in local summer in DJF compared to June, July, August, and there is like 120 hectopascal in the maximum at the center. I also want to point out that there is a more zonal mean component in the June, July, August, obviously for the Hadley circulation. So the asymmetry component DJF is more in here. So question becomes, what is leading to the asymmetry component of the South Pacific anticyclone? As compared to the not focusing on the other Southern Hemisphere subtropical anticyclone, but on the South Pacific anticyclone at the same time. So if you look at the other, just not the Era-interim, but other product, for example, mirror a reanalysis had SLP2, which is satellite data, and the multi-product mean of it, and for DJF in the left panel. As a residual method, and the vector here shown is the 1000 hectopascal wind divergence. So basically a surface divergence. And other than the land, one of the prominent heating regions are in the southern hemisphere that is more stronger in strength is over the West and South Pacific. And there is a strong convergence associated with it. There are more wind vector with the vertical integrated diabatic heating. So the heating is maximum in DJF in the West and South Pacific, which is known as South Pacific Convergence Zone, or SPCZ. So the SPCZ heating is seasonally stronger, associated with a strong convergence in DJF in austral summer, whereas in June, July, August, the heating decreases, it weakens in strength, and it somehow somewhat moves towards northern hemisphere, and there is not that much strong convergence over that place. If we look at the upper tropospheric 200 hectopascal wind divergence, here shaded color are wind divergence, and vectors are wind vector associated with the divergence. So the seasonality here is also same, that in DJF they are more stronger in local summer, and the area is like bigger with the convergence and divergence zone, where in the June, July, August in winter it moves toward the northern hemisphere, and there is not that much stronger divergence in the 200 hectopascal. So our hypothesis is that due to the change of the upper level divergence wind and wind vector associated with it, it influences the southern hemisphere large scale circulation that also influences the anticyclone in the subtropics in the southern hemisphere. Now, to test our hypothesis, we look at the Era-interim Composite analysis. So in SPZ region, we create like a composite. So this is a DJF composite difference of diabatic heating over that region. So basically like a El Nino minus La Nina composite type of thing. So we picked out 5 years maximum heating years over that region minus 5 minimum heating years over that region. So only for DJF, so it's kind of looking into how internal variability picks out, although our question is seasonality, but in DJF, we can only look at that, the composite analysis. And this is basically showing there is like a shift of heating in over the years from northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere or the SPZ region. Now, how does that composite analysis actually influences other variables such as sea level pressure and geopotential height and storm tracks? And so this is the same figure as the last one we have seen, and the top right figure shows the sea level pressure. Same composite analysis for sea level pressure, and where blue contour line shows the area of the 5 years mean of the minimum heating years, or the black contour here shows the climatological position of the anticyclones area of the center, and the white line here shows the 5 years maximum heating years of the anticyclone of the sea level pressure associated with it. And the color here shows the sea level pressure differences between the 5 years maximum and 5 years minimum. And as you can see, there is like with the cooling, there is like a decrease of area, whereas with more heating, there is an increase of area over there. Whereas in Atlantic and Indian, there is not that much of significance. Even with the t-test, we have a 95% significant t-test here with the stippling, and there is not much of a difference of sea level pressure change of area, strength and area associated with Atlantic and Indian anticyclone, whereas there is definitely increase of area and strength of sea level pressure associated with the subtropical anticyclone in increased heating over the SPCZ region. So when the heating gets more in the southernmost position of the SPCZ region, we have a more increase of area and the sea level pressure. And the left bottom figure shows the geopotential height. So basically height differences, same composite analysis, and we can see there is a positive negative height anomaly associated with, which is kind of like a classic Rossby wave response, and which is somewhat similar to sea level pressure also. So where the sea level pressure increases, the height also increases. And the bottom right figure shows the B prime, which is a 6-day high pass filter with a Butterworth filter, 300 hectopascal, showing how the storm tracks strength are doing associated with the composite analysis. So we have like a decrease of storm track strength over the equatorial flank, and there is like increase of strength over the Atlantic and Indian Ocean. So there is kind of like a shift of storm tracks over the Atlantic and Indian, whereas there is somewhat an increase of storm track strength over the Pacific, southern mid-Pacific. Now, this is a composite analysis, and this heating can be due to a lot of region, like the internal variability mode of SST and everything. So we have to test it out with a idealized simulation that where we can have like everything stay similarly, other than change of the SPCZ heating. So that's what we do with the CSM2, which is a community arc system model 2. So we use CAM or CAM6 or Community Atmospheric Model 6 to change the SPCZ heating and see how it can influence our anticyclone and other large-scale circulation in Southern Hemisphere and TJF. So we run a 30 years of control run with a CAM6 arbitrary initial condition with prescribed sea surface temperature. So our every other mode is same. Sea surface temperature and ocean model is prescribed from Era-interim, and we run a 30 years of control run. Then we run two other sets of experiment, numerical experiment. One is the cooling and heating. So cooling and heating is basically adding artificially cooling over the SPCZ region, and adding is basically an opposite, same heating in opposite way, putting a little bit more heating over the SPCZ region. This is not a prescribed heating, so we kind of like part out the heating over that place, and model creates its own anomaly heating over that region also. So it is not prescribed. So as a result, we're not forcing the circulation, but we are just suggesting the model like create more heating or cooling over that region, and it tries to create it by itself. And so the 30 years of heating and cooling are started from, it's a seasonal run from November to next year, February. And we only compare December, January, February during the first month so that model can be stabilized. And the temperature tendency is maximum still applied is like 15% like in the center. And then we Gaussian decayed it near the edge of the box and over to, top and bottom. And heating is centered around 170 degrees, 10 degrees south, and 5.5 hectopascal, which is like over the SPCZ region. So this is sea level pressure climatology from CSM2. The same figure as before, TJF in the top and June, July, August in the bottom. And we can definitely see that the seasonal cycle of the anticyclone actually shows similarity with the Era-interim. In the South Pacific, anticyclone is more stronger in DJF, whereas the South Atlantic and Indian is stronger in June, July, August. However, I want to point out that the sea level pressure is way intensified in CSM2 compared to Era-interim. For example, the maximum is like 120 hectopascal is shown here, whereas maximum that we have like 122 hectopascal in Era-interim. However, as we have a seasonal cycle, right, we can test our seasonal cycle hypothesis with the CSM2, and that should be fine for our experiment. Now, I want to focus on the top left figure. This is for 30 years mean of additive cooling experiments that shows diabatic heating, and the bottom figure shows from the added heating of 30 years mean. And we can see there is like a decrease of heating over the cooling region whereas there is the increase of heating over that region. And the top right figure actually shows that by added cooling minus control, we have like a decrease of extremes over the region. We have a magnitude of the divergence change. So this is 200 hectopascal divergence, upper tropospheric divergence. So we are seeing that there is a decrease of magnitude of the divergence with the wind vector, whereas with the additive heating, there are increase of magnitude of divergence heating over the SPCZ region. This can be also seen with the differences, same figure as before, cooling minus control showing decrease of divergence with associated decrease of heating over the SPCZ region and decrease of divergence over the SPCZ region with basically cooling minus elevated heating. Now, I also point out that there are other places we have a divergence as a result of feedback. As I said, this is not a prescribed heating. We merely just say suggest a model to show region where the model can create anomaly of heating. So model kind of feedbacks to create other places heating, but we found that these heating are not stronger enough to dominate the circulation changes significantly. This is kind of like a place as a secondary role, almost like non-existent. So yeah. Now, how does the divergence wind actually influences it? So this is a vorticity equation which can be written in terms of absolute vorticity, rotational wind, then gradients of absolute vorticity from tropics to pole. Then we have a divergence and divergence wind vector, and we have again the absolute vorticity gradients from tropics to pole. Now this equation can be divided into two parts. One is the propagation of Rossby wave in the left-hand side, and the forcing terms of the Rossby wave on the right-hand side. What does it mean is that we can, if we significantly change one of the terms over here, we will have we can create a Rossby wave. We can trigger a Rossby wave that can propagate into the higher latitude. So in our case, the divergence and divergence wind vector changes significantly over the SPZ region, and it triggers a Rossby wave responses over that propagates toward the southern hemisphere and influences the anticyclone. Now let's look into how does actually it influences the anticyclone. So these are the same figure as last figures, but for sea level pressure. This is for 30 years of cooling. This is for 30 years of heating. And the top right is added cooling minus control. And the bottom right is for added cooling minus added heating. I want to focus on these two figures basically, which kind of explains everything. So this is the color shading here are the sea level pressure differences. Whereas the black here is the 30 years of control run, whereas the blue is from cooling, 30 years of cooling experiments, whereas the white contour is from the 30 years of contour, 30 years of sea level pressure from 30 years of added heating experiments. And we can see there is with the cooling, there is like almost non-existent area of South Pacific anticyclone, whereas in Atlantic and Indian, they're kind of overlapping with each other. So there's like non-significant changes over the Atlantic and Indian Ocean. What is it that why we can see with the white contour, there is with added heating, we have an increase of area, whereas compared to the control run. And if you look at the sea level pressure differences, we have like a very nice positive negative anomaly over the southern hemisphere, subtropical to medial region, which is kind of like a signature of the Rossby wave train. So basically, with a decrease, weakening of the SPCZ in DJF in austral summer, we have a weakening sea level pressure decrease of the South Pacific anticyclone from center to polar flanks, especially over in Atlantic and Indian. This is more of like in storm track region rather than over the anticyclones region of the subtropics. And if you look at the geopotential height, we have a similar story that we have a decrease of height. So with the weakening of the SPCZ heating. And so basically weakening of SPCZ heating leads to the weakening of the divergence, and divergence wind leads to weakening of the height. So a decrease of height, whereas the positive negative height anomalies are in other places in the southern hemisphere subtropical region, which is due to the Rossby wave anomalies, but not relating to the anticyclone in the Atlantic and Indian Ocean. Now, this is figure basically showing that what is happening with the SPCZ and South Pacific anticyclone with like a point by point. So in the left panel shows the dot line here showing the control run from this is DJF control run, and this is June, July, August control run. And this red line here bar showing how much we put added heating over the SPCZ region. So this is basically suggesting the perturbation of it. And this is the added heating we have over the SPCZ region, total heating. So basically we can see, you see that we part of it like very small amount of it, whereas model creating a huge anomaly associated with the same direction. Similar to the added cooling, we have a cooling perturbation and creating a large cooling over the SPCZ region in June, July, August. So this is basically showing the seasonal cycle of it. So if you have an extreme case scenario, this is kind of like 80% of the seasonal cycle of the SPCZ. We have a similar thing here with the South Pacific anticyclone. So basically with more heating over the South Pacific and South Pacific convergence zone, we have a sea level pressure strength increase. With the cooling, we have a decrease of sea level pressure associated with the subtropical anticyclone in the South Pacific. So in summary, heating over the South Pacific and the convergence zone, which is makes DJF influences the southern hemisphere large-scale circulation, especially the South Pacific anticyclone. So due to the increased heating during austral summer, we have a upper level divergence in 200 hectopascal. Upper level divergence and divergence rate triggers a Rossby wave, and this Rossby train propagates in the southern hemisphere subtropical and mid-latitude region. However, this is only significantly changing the South Pacific anticyclone in the center and polar flank. However, in South Atlantic and South Indian, the changes are more over the south, more over the storm tracks region rather than an anticyclone strand. So there is no any significant changes in terms of area and strength over the Atlantic and Indian Ocean subtropical anticyclone. SPSD heating also weakens the strength of storm tracks in the southern hemisphere and they shift type of poleward, especially in the Atlantic and Indian region. The storm track shifts poleward and weakens in the equatorial flank and increasing the poleward flank, which I've been shown figure. Yeah, and these are references. Thank you.
Thank you, Fahad. Very nice talk. Yeah, probably we should go to the questions on the chat. And if anyone has any questions, type on the chat. I'm going to read. You have one question from Brian Mapes. I'm going to read it to you, and if you can have an answer for. Brian asked that he was wondering if the stream function total and eddy deviations of the zonal mean might give you a clearer view of the strength instead of looking at the anticyclone from a sea level perspective.
Right. Oh, yeah. Okay. I just can see the question right now. I wonder. I will repeat the question for everyone. I wonder if stream function, total, and eddy derivation from zonal mean might have a clear view of the strength. For instance, DJF versus June-July gust of the anticyclone, then sea level pressure, or is it similar? So this is something that we have. I have basically looked into my whole PhD. That what is how to define the anticyclone properly, because some people uses 850 hectopascal geopotential height, some people use sea level pressure, and some people use this stream function. So I found for southern hemisphere, there's like virtually like no differences. There are differences in the northern hemisphere due to the land and ocean, basically an orographical region. But in southern hemisphere, there is no differences at all. If, for example, if you look at the wind circulation at 925 hectopascal, this is kind of like mimics the stream function a lot. I hope that answered your question. Thank you.